tiny details of research and design, usability. So this was May 17, that was my first day at Esri, and well, then Esri changed the way I think about things. It went a little crazy, and all the things up there are real things that happened. I remember my manager saying, "You don't get to cry," or something on the lines of, "Did he even check the requirements before bringing this in front of me?" Overall, all those things and those 12 weeks helped me realize that design is different from a fixed process. It's about designing the process based on every project and the requirement of every project. So the more adaptable you are, the more flexible you are, there's a better chance of it being a good design. The way I was able to learn this was because I was working as a UX architect intern. That essentially meant that I was doing design, I was doing research, management, and analysis. I was going over to the other side and speaking to developers, having interviews with them, presenting to them, and at the same time I was working with the design team and creating a lot of things. So over 12 weeks I was able to work on 6 large projects. 3 of them were team projects. 2 of them were with Amoli, who was my co-worker and who sat in front of me. So if you have any questions about the projects, feel free to ask her. I also worked on independent projects. The first project that I worked on as soon as I got there was comparative research. That is something I hadn't done before, and the only reason we did that, we worked on this for 3 weeks, we looked at 20 different products. We only did this so we could establish design requirements with the developers. So this was done just so we could present this to developers and make them realize what they wanted. Once we got those requirements, we got out our sketchbooks and our pens and papers. We ideated, we brainstormed, we wireframed. We iterated on the thing you see on the right about 50 times over 3 weeks. There was silent crying involved, I think, between Amoli and me. And the last thing I worked on was towards the end. Because we had been critiqued so many times for the previous project, I interviewed designers, I spoke to a lot of people, over a dozen designers, and it was just the idea that we need a better way to critique each other and basically ourselves, and that is what those cards were about. We got a good break when we went to the user conference in San Diego. It was the annual conference where 20,000 people attend, and all of them are GIS nerds, and I was able to do usability tests with them, experience tests with them, and carry out some of my personal surveys. A fun weekend involved a 48-hour hackathon where I came up with this with my team. It was a 5-person team. I was the only designer. So the UI, the UX, logo, story, presentation, all of that fed on me, which was kind of fun. So a few sleepless days, but it was a good event. We made it to the finals. And overall, some of the things that were new for me, as I said, it was my first full-time experience. I worked on a lot of new products, whether it's for wireframing or research. There were some concepts that involved collaboration, like daily stand-up or meet and greets, which was very interesting. Some of the things that I learned and I want to bring back here, we need Nerf guns in the studio. Every day at 5 p.m. we could just start shooting each other, which was nice. And apart from that, little things like comparative research or questioning everything you do at school, that's incredibly important. I feel I'm confident about where I am now, just because of that. And a big part of that was the weekends, where we traveled and partied. 50 interns lived together in a big apartment complex, so there was always someone to just hang out with or go around. So we visited a lot of places in California and Nevada, which was super fun. Overall, I was able to work on team projects, independent projects, then there was a lot of research that was involved, then planning for the big conference, and just being a small part in a big company. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and the headquarters are 3,500 people working there, so just being part of that. It's a beautiful place. They have really good offices, it's a good atmosphere. The owner is also a landscaper and a billionaire, so he made the whole place, he designed the ponds and the walkways. But more than the place, I think it was about the people and everyone I worked with or everyone I stayed with or had fun with. So whether it was working hard, going and playing laser tag with the friends, or just partying over the weekend, which was super fun. I think it was a very good experience because of the people, and that's what I have. And I want to thank you for being a part of my experience. Do you guys have any questions?
Can you explain more about the plates card? Like, how
Yeah. So it came about as an independent project. In my first week, I spoke to my manager and I talked about all these readings that we do and the different classes that there's so many academic papers and research that we do. I want to employ it. So the last week he just comes up to me and he's like, oh, you mentioned something like that. Why don't you do another project and just submit it to me on your last day? I had no idea what to do. So the way I started was I went out and interviewed 12 of the designers that worked there and just asking them questions about themselves, the way they design, the projects they work on. I took that and I tied it to the academic research. So you read the paper from Hasenthal or even Chabot and Jeff's paper, interaction criticism. So I combined all of those things to come with those cards. And they're using them right now. I spoke to my manager, so they have some good feedback for it.
So a common theme among most of the presenters is the really vague prompts or things that you have to kind of pull apart. Did you have any experiences with things that were your assignments very bite-sized, gigantic, ambiguous? What were your assignments like, roughly?
So I think it was a mix of both. Some of them were bite-sized, especially the individual ones that I was doing. But the team projects were based on the company's sprint cycle, and they have quarterly releases. So trying to adapt to that while being designer-y in your own way. And you mentioned about prompts. So the first project I showed you, which was comparative research, Amoli and I worked on that for 3 to 4 weeks, and the only reason of doing that was to present it to the developers, get critiqued very harshly, and just by having that conversation end up with the requirements. So we were not given a design brief for that. The goal was to get a design brief. And so we spent 3 weeks doing that so we could move on to the next step.
So you mentioned you dealt with 6 projects during your.
Yes.
Were they small projects which required a 2 weeks duration, like sprint, or you were going between the projects at the same time?
It was going between the projects. 2 of the projects were about 6 weeks each. So they were basically, my whole internship was, I was working on them at some point of time. The other 4 were around like 2 to 4 weeks each. So there was a lot of parallel processing going on. So on the team projects, if I was working with my team, 2 hours later I was working on my own. So in just those 8 hours, it was about finding enough time and working on. I was working on almost each project every week.
Hi everyone, I'm Sanket. Since after 3 days know me, I'm a second year master's student. My contact details are right on the slide. When I'm not talking about design, I love to play table tennis, swim. I love to bike. I also read a lot about macroeconomics and world politics, so feel free to talk to me about any of these topics. So talking about my internship, I interned at LexisNexis. To explain in one sentence, LexisNexis is like the Google for lawyers. My internship was in Dayton, Ohio, and they really have a huge campus in Dayton. It's the headquarters. They have 10 huge buildings in Dayton, and the campus is really nice. Even Dayton as a town is quite laid back. So the story about how I got my internship, since I did not have any professional experience working in companies, it was pretty hard to get an internship in the first place. I applied to a lot of companies, so I interviewed with around 3 or 4 different companies, and when I got my offer from LexisNexis, I was in the final stages of my interviews with 2 other companies. So it was quite an interesting spot to be in. Since LexisNexis was eager to get an intern on board, They even agreed to give me a bump in the salary, so that worked out pretty well, and I was excited to go join them. The people I was going to work with were super awesome. I knew that from the start. These are some details about the company itself. They have a revenue of $3,696 million. They have their offices in 75 different countries, and this is a list of all the products they have. And by the way, the revenue is just from two of these products in this list, which I worked on. They have more than 10,000 employees and hundreds and thousands of users, so that was an interesting fact. So what is it like to work in such a large company? Obviously, it has its perks. I really had a nice huge cube. I could order however number of monitors I wanted. So that was fun. But the challenging part is, since there were a lot of people working at the company, I had to collaborate with a lot of people while I was there. So the UX lead and the graphic design lead were the people from the UX team. I was working in the research team, so I worked with the programmer, the lead prototyper, and my manager itself. There was a lead manager who was overseeing my manager. So that was the hierarchy under which I was working, and I was the only UX designer in the research lab. So this is a list of projects I worked on. My internship was 3 months long, and these projects did not take place serially. So I was working on multiple things at a time. The second project was a really huge one. It was more than what UX can ever think about. And the testing was something that we did at the end. So starting with my first project, this was the product. So what happens is in that product, when you type something, the results that show up are like a link to the file and a bunch of text. So I had to improve the usability of the entire product. So this was small UX research and UX problem. I did some hovering features and all that. Moving on to the second project, this was the biggest project of my internship. This was more than just having pretty graphs. I had to visualize the entire legal documents. So this was all that I had to do over the course of the internship. Not only just figure out what data to pick and how to represent something, it was more about how to make it usable at the end. And my next project was now throw all that away and think of some other visualizations for the same legal documents. So it was a pretty interesting. This was my workflow for developing new visualizations for existing legal documents. So we did a lot of sketching, whiteboarding with my manager and the prototyper. And finally, when I was done with designing all the mockups and the wireframes, we got a lot of feedback, positive as well as negative. So the feedback we got were from huge law firms as well as single lawyers. So our user group was pretty diverse, so the feedback we got was pretty diverse. At the end of the day, what did I learn? Since this was a huge company, this was my first time I was working as a full-time intern. I took some time to get accustomed to what the company culture was, how the hierarchy works, what is the role of UX, what is the role of the research lab, understanding that. So to start with my first point, how to deal with programmers and prototypers. I was working with a prototyper whose work I had to take and make it more usable without offending him because it wasn't usable. So one thing I employed over here was to praise the work first and then start with the bugs. The bug part I mean the UD. So the second big thing I learned was how to push a feature in the product. This was a big thing. The usability test, improving the UX thing that I did in the first part, I had to push it into the product, and to do that I had to work with the graphic designer, take the graphic style guys, work with the UX lead, and then like convince them why this has to be in the product. This is a common advice I feel, but I really want to stress on why you need to keep your manager impressed. If I did not impress my manager with my work, if he did not have confidence in me, he would not have allowed me to do the user test, which I did at the end, and which was really important for my learning experience. In design, we always say you have to speak up, you have to express your ideas. But working in corporate culture, I discovered that you have to speak up, but make sure you don't speak up at the wrong time. There are hierarchies at work in such a huge company. I was dealing with UX lead, I was dealing with graphic design lead, and even though I was an intern, I had to make my value felt. So it was crazy. The other good thing I did during my course of internship was network crazy. I just did not network with people in LexisNexis, and I networked with people in Elsevier. That's the another company that's under the same umbrella of companies. So it was interesting because they were using some softwares which I got to know by working with them, and I told that to my manager, and he was impressed. So this photo is unedited, untouched photo that I took from my trip to Niagara Falls. over one of the long weekends. I made a lot of new friends outside of work and even with colleagues, and I used to bike to work daily. So that's how I developed my love for biking. That's all about my internship. Thank you for listening to all of this, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. By the way, that's my manager who I work with, Richard Miller. He's the lead researcher at LexisNexis, and he's the head of intern recruitment. And they usually come every year to IU to recruit 1 or 2 interns. So feel free to talk to me about this opportunity. I would be more than happy to discuss with you about all the details. Any questions?
Yes. So you talked about pushing features. What were some obstacles you would meet people trying to convince them that a feature was worthwhile?
So to begin with, I had to convince them why we are. So my prompt over here was to make the app more usable, make the website more usable, and then that was the push the UX team was looking for. But then, even if I design something, even if I make the app more useful or more usable, I had to convince the product manager why they need to do it. And so one of the biggest challenges was, how do I convince them? The technique I employed over here was to have a strong rationale. I also had user data which said, like, there were reports of users who were frustrated because of the amount of scrolling they had to do to find the right document. So I employed simple UX techniques like collapsing things so that you don't have to scroll it out, hovering on things. So having a strong rationale for each and everything that you do, because I received a lot of pushback regarding the breaking points of whatever I was suggesting. So I got questions like, okay, you suggest we hover on things. What happens when I want some information in place versus I want to look at other information? So these are the questions you need to be prepared to answer if you're pushing for. So that was one of my challenges. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
This is something that I wanted to ask I'll ask you. You guys spoke about it being like the first opportunity in the professional space, and both of you spoke about like heavy interaction with development teams. Can you like speak a little bit more about the interplay between design and development?
Sure. There was a reason I used the word programmer on my slide versus developer, because I didn't actually work with developers at the time. The programmer that was there on my team was supposed to give me the raw data. So LexisNexis has a huge data of what their users do on their website. So this programmer was responsible for fetching that data from the server and giving that data to me. So I was in a way dependent on what data he was giving me. But there was challenges working with the programmer and the prototyper. One of the challenges was, so one of the important, I would say, thing was I was dependent on their data. So at some point, so there was a scenario where I knew what data I wanted, but the data he gave me was way different than I expected. So that pushed our project back by 1 or 2 weeks, and stuff like that used to happen. Sorry I couldn't answer your question directly.
I just wanted to understand that exchange.
Yeah, that particular exchange did not happen in my case where I designed something and give it to the developer and then they come back on it. That did not happen.
Cool. Thank you. Next up,
So, I'm Alice, and first of all, thank you for calling us FCP to doing advertisement for our company, because our company is COTS.
Okay.
So, currently, Xtime is purchased by COTS, so we are COTS now. So I'll introduce my internship at Xtime, Redwood City, California. So I just introduce a little bit of myself. I'm a second-year master's student in the program. And before I came to the program, I was majored in electronic engineering. Yes, I was an engineer, but not anymore. But you can still ask me about Arduino, things like that. Yeah, I miss a little bit. So I used to intern at Mercedes-Benz Research and Development Center, China, and working on And we have a whole series of platforms called Spectrum. More specifically, it's invite, schedule, engage, and inspect. What that for? Directly, it's for improving the experience, working flow of dealerships, but ultimately, we're improving the end user's experience. So within our team, we're under the product management department, and we're working very closely with the PM and developers. So currently we are a lot of stuff, but currently don't have enough designers. So the ratio is like one designer have 1 to 2.5 products, and we have 6 designers, me and 1 UI developer. So this is a project I'm working on during the summer. So for the schedule, we have customer portal and dealership portal. I'm mainly working on the consumer portal. And actually, this project is my main project. It's a little special because it's across 2 languages. So I'm doing internationalize our products. So we have the plan to release our product into CJK market. Specifically, it means China, Japan, and Korea. And the way I do this whole project, because I'm basically the person who in charge of hosting. I internationalize the current product first. I do basically 60-ish wireframes, and then I wrap up the test and perform it with local Chinese people who are currently living in China. So it's remotely by using GoToMeeting. And then I summarize and analyze the feedback. I wrote out the report. And then the final step for me is I present it and propose the next step to the customers, designers, PMs, VPs, and directors. So this is a little surprise because there's one day I was going to eat lunch, but a whole bunch of people just going there like, can you present to us what you are doing now? I said, yes. So those people are all exactly from Cox Automotive. So the CEO, CIO, CFO, COO, C1O, a lot of C1O. So it was surprising, but it's very good for me. I enjoy every moment of that. So this is another main project for me. Is called it's redesign a small part of the whole system. So how I approach this is I explore different ways to display information, and then I critique with team. Okay, I'm reading. I know. They print iterations, then I build a mock-up and deliver to the PM. Then I work with PM to build in the features, and that is my first design in the real world, because it is really great. And this is not within the internship, but it's another fun thing for me, another very fun thing I did during summer. I go to a conference called SIGGRAPH, and I know tons of interesting people and know tons of very interesting technologies. So that guy is Greg, who also our alumni. And I know a lot of very awesome volunteers, and I collect a lot of awards and everything. And I go to a lot of very cool parties. So what I learned, let's wait for 20 seconds. So what I learned is it's very important, almost 30 seconds. So the first thing I learned very important is consider who is the audience for doing the presentation and be aware of your purpose of the presentation. So there's one time between our team and one of the VP, we have a debate for 2 hours. The VP just said, give me the main point, the top 5. And the designers want to say, we just want to tell you more about this. The VP said, no, I just want to know the top 5. So they have like a 2-hour debate. So if you're going to present, consider who is your audience. And then the second point is communicate with people, but with both designers and non-designers. So the communicate with designers to get a lot of like tips for design and also for design processes like that, and also talk to like Scrum Masters and PMs, developers to kind of know what is their workflow, and it increases your emphasis for people. And then, okay, I'll jump another point. So the last point I learned is how to live an undergrad life and how to efficiently get free food and get into free parties. what I really want to say is how to talk to people, how to make friends, and how to laugh. It's very important part if you have an internship in somewhere. Okay, so that they don't hurry, and this end. Do you guys have some questions?
How many parties did you attend?
Okay, about CBREF, it's like we are volunteers and we work from like 8 to 5 or 6, and it's like super hectic and super exhausted. But after that, but for us, you still need to feel like at the beginning of the day and go out party through the night. So I go to the Pixar party and Google platform party. And a lot of parties for big companies. So that's the same for a conference. If you're going to a conference, that's basically the same you will do like after the main activities. That's what you're expecting from a conference.
So 6.
More than six.
There's a photograph of you, your food and 20 people.
Yeah.
So did they just like come to you and just said start presenting or something?
No, actually it's like that day I was going to heat up my lunch. And I just put my lunch box in the microwave and I go back to my place to fetch something. And then the CIO of our company said, you see those kind of those group of people? I said yes. So there are all the executives from COPS. Can you present to them what you are doing for an international project? Because this project is currently very important to them, and I'm totally in charge of that. And I said, sure. So without any preparations, and I presented it's like an elevator pitch in 3 minutes. And I think it's very good because everybody laughing because I made some joke.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So you worked on an international product that was being developed for multiple audiences in different languages. Could you talk a little bit about accessibility stuff you had to design around? Because I did some stuff over the summer a little bit like that, and different languages taking up different amounts of space. Something was very tricky.
Yeah, so I'm the person who translates all these based on my own skill of Chinese and English. So I do realize that Chinese is hard. Especially you want to translate into exactly the same meaning and within a certain sense. So so even for that, I have a bit of small brainstorming session, different ways to express the same meaning. It's a little interesting. Feels like it's very interesting, and also deal with 2 different cultures. Let me realize more things I didn't realize before.
So to build off that, I think you guys in China, the reading style is different. So did you have to rearrange stuff, or was it literally just changing the text?
So currently the first step is literally changing the text, and because we want to get the initial feedback about how people think about things if we just directly move it from the U.S. market to another market. It's a huge difference in the culture, so it might not work. And it turns out it doesn't work. So we need to currently in China the trend is everything is local. So we cannot just build up our desktop version of the product. We need to move it into mobile and build it within the product called WeChat.
Did you put it in a WeChat?
Yeah, that's our result. From my report, we need to move to the step. If we want to go to Chinese market, we have to cooperate with WeChat, and I have a lot of good reason to back up my statement.
That's just cool.
Thank you.
So my name is Naveen. I interned at Ruby as an accelerator innovation experience design intern. My name is Krishna. And I was at a explain what my designation is. Okay. So what is Adobe Hive is something that is very unique. So this was my team. So initially I started by just me and my manager, and then 4 other awesome ladies joined the team, and so we are like 6 of us with the same motto that get shit done, because it's work at very fast rate. Like the problems that we get are not simple normal challenges, it's more of like a business challenge. Okay, so what is exactly Adobe Hive? It's basically like a Google spread. What happens is like a company comes with a business challenge. So you need to ask them the right question. You have to see which team has to go to the design space that we call Adobe Hive. Okay, and then we have over a period of 2 to 3 days sessions that are conducted. So what was my task? Initially my task was to learn the Hive methodology. The second thing is to facilitate the Hive sessions which are going on. So there are different things that goes on in the session. So I have to make sure that everything goes on well. And third thing is to find the right research methods which can be used in this Hive. So one of the interesting projects that I did was to improve the cafeteria experience. So the Adobe culinary team came to us and asked, how can we improve the cafeteria experience over there? So these are the food that I actually ate during the sessions. So yeah, so the thing was like, so the first thing we needed to do was bring in the executives, bring in the chefs, bring in the people, the best in hospitality people in SF and around US. And what we did was all of us together did empathy mapping, did a lot of research, did a lot of interviews. So now and actually Danny was also part of it, where we interviewed the employees to understand what these guys need. And then in the Hive session, we saw how to create a roadmap. So the second project that I did was basically more of a technical thing. I don't want to explain it, but the problem was there were all the basic vice presidents and directors of different clouds who came together and were fighting with each other. And our job was to make sure that at the end of the day, they have a roadmap. So that was a tough challenge. And the third and most important project that I did was to see how future meeting rooms looks like. So I did a lot of research in it, like we designers work in a very different environment, the engineers work in a different environment, and the office space has a single meeting rooms. So we had to design how meeting room will look like. So I researched a lot, I did a lot of part sorting, interviewed again a lot of people, did experience prototyping, where I brought in different cool technologies and different things, and saw how these people do their conduct their meetings basically. So the best part about it is that nobody does it right. Like even we mess up our design meetings, even the executives mess up their design meetings, even the engineers mess up. So that was something that I learned. And the second part of my internship, basically what I did was to redesign all the Hive internal tools. So my manager gave me like, this was an individual task. There were 3 design sprints, around 80 tools that I looked into, and there were 6 tasks like creating Hive wiki pages or Hive other forms, Adobe forms and all. So the things that I learned during this design sprints was that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like there are tons of tools out there. You just need to see which one will work for your team. That's it. And you need to talk to the right people. Like I used Dropbox and I didn't know how the Dropbox worked for business things. So I just made the Dropbox team and got it. The interesting part was like I was AI for IT not in database, and one of the business challenge project that I showed, their executives were actually fighting over to see how the data model works. And I was like, I know it. So it's basically about grabbing the opportunity, seeing if you know something, just the best way, because it's an internship, you just show off whatever you have. The second thing is again the design thinking workshop. I know most of us learn how to do design thinking over here. So I conducted like 3 design thinking workshops, first for my team, then for my extended team, and then kind of like there were 3 to 4 other Adobe teams that came in to see what a design thinking is. So basically in my internship, I did a lot of things which included business point, the design point, and the technology point. So I felt like, yeah, I covered everything. And the best part was, it was not monotonous. Everything that I did like every day was challenging because the questions that I got were not very common. Like the problem with that was I had so many things on my plate at once that my manager had to come to me and say that, Naveen, you can just say no. The problem is, as an intern, whoever comes to you, you just go and say, yeah, please, I can do that. And the problem is, at one time, I had so many things on my plate that I didn't know which was like prioritizing. And the best part of Adobe was like, you get 1 week full shutdown. So, most of us, like me, Nava, and Danny were roaming around the 1 week. We get a lot of swags free, and then there are parties that happen like every week we have happy hours. So yeah, that's another big thing that I did. And yeah, then you have a project fair, you work for it, the entire nobody comes down to see what you did. You just again show off like, yeah, I did this thing. The best part is like you get to see what other teams are doing, other interns are doing, and there are a lot of cool stuff that goes out over there. And not only that, because it was in Bay Area, the best part was you get a lot to do things outside the office. So I went to B school to attend a design thinking workshop, and it was pretty fun. And again, I felt like because we learn a lot over here in NCIT, I kind of become a superhero over there because I see everything. The problem is, yeah, so you learn a lot over here in NCIT, and which many people out there doesn't know. So it's a cool way of showing off. And then again, Sarah and I went for yeah, it was again a fun thing to do. And then we went for a lot of conferences and meetups out there, me and Noah. So using your opportunity, like the internship time, is really important because it's 3 months. You have a lot of things out there, and SF, like Bay Area is a lot of more of like a design area where tons of things are going on. So yeah, that's it.
It's limited to one question. We have 3 more presenters. Running out of time.
Will you teach us? Use hand raise.
You talked about Adobe Hive. At Adobe Hive, you like define a design process for teams, and you mentioned Google's design sprint. What are the differences? Is there a single process that you follow? What did you learn?
Adobe Hive is like Google Sprint on steroids because basically these teams who come to us are not trying to make a new product. It's like they have been working on it for years, not years, but months, and they didn't find a solution. So they come to us and say that, okay, we have been trying this for like 5 to 6 months, and we don't have much time. So tell us a solution so that we can just go back and do our work. So basically, most of the problems are like what to do as a roadmap for the next 2 years. So what we do is like me and my manager, we conduct design meetings with the people who actually came to us with the question. So we try to understand their problems and then see who should be recruited for the Hive sessions. Like for the culinary team one, so we understood that the problem is they are not advertising to the employees. Like what do employees want in the cafeteria? They are not understanding that. So what we did was we brought in chefs, like executive chefs. We brought in hospitality management people outside in SF, like the best people. So we brought all of them together. So it was a 2-day event. So the first day what we did was basically just advertising. So we conducted interviews where these guys were also there. So we made chefs interview these people. So we gave them a discussion guide, told them how to conduct interviews. And then we made them do empathy mapping and say this are the problems that they have. And then the next day what it is like there is something called high methodology, basically like sprint, where we have particular assignments that are it's designed for every problem a different way. So the entire day what they do is like they have a goal after each assignment, and at the end of the day they go back to the roadmap and then they continue.
So do you have a fixed process for it?
No. So the thing is like because like my manager and few people out there, they have worked on like tons of problems like this, so they have an idea. Like the people will come with a problem statement, they will try, they don't know what to do, and then it's like the best thing is like you just ask them more questions, and they themselves will have an answer. So that's the thing. So it's just about making them. Yeah. So it's like my manager will keep on poking them, asking questions. Did you talk to the other person? They might have a better answer. So that is it.
Really looking forward to it.
It's ironic how this presentation works considering what my job was this summer, so let's just all laugh and have a good time. Alright everyone, my name is Hannah. I'm a second year and I work at Salesforce this summer. It's in Indianapolis, the second largest hub for Salesforce. The first one's in San Francisco, which clearly they had like 200 and some interns there, and they had 50 in Indy, so still a pretty considerable amount. So
volunteering, youths, and unicorns. So when you look at this, you're probably like, what the hell is she even talking about? Because it's not relevant to us, right? It's entirely relevant, and I'm going to tell you why. So money is a big deal. By closing deals with top-tier clients, Salesforce drives their ACV or their stock for the following fiscal year. So they kind of predict 2 years ahead how much money they're going to have in order to budget it for UX strategies and other products development. In order to close these deals, you got to develop pitch decks, which is what my job was. So I was given strategic stories and turned them into actual presentations for top-tier clients such as Angie's List, Loblaws, Office Depot, Air Canada, things like that. These are made by my team in general. So creative developers, digital designers, creative strategists, they all come together, they build these, and they give them to business consultants who then actually deliver them on site to whoever the client is. So while I didn't touch the biggest names, there were some pretty big names out there. Coffee. It's not just there to get you through the afternoon lull. It's actually extremely important. It's the lifeblood of Salesforce. It brings people together, and it also helps you actually power through those tough days like this does. But it also is there because it helps you actually speak to people. They encourage you to talk to people through coffee chats to learn about different positions that exist in Salesforce. And by doing so, you can understand what you might like to do instead of the job you are doing, or collaborate with people in the future. So that was really helpful for me. So volunteering is another big thing with Salesforce. They actually give you VTO, which is volunteer time off. The interns were expected to complete at least 16 hours in the summer. So I worked at the Microbrewers Festival, I worked at Gleaner's Food Drive, and I cleaned up a nature trail at elementary school. And this one makes me and you get to do it wherever, whenever you want to. So with the Microbrewers Festival, that was something I chose to do by myself, and I really enjoyed it because I spent 4 or 5 hours there just helping people find new beer. Youths are a big deal as well, especially in any internship, because the odds are with you guys being in this program, you're not 19 years old. And furthermore, that was what my roommate's age was. So being 26 and living with a 19-year-old is exceptionally difficult at times. However, she was cool, so it was all good. But it's important to think about this because you're going to always be working with people that are younger than you. And furthermore, sometimes they're going to think they know more than you, and sometimes they will. And sometimes they won't. And you have to deal with your own ego in order to work with other people. I know a lot of people here understand what that feels like. So, the other, and as I mentioned, you're always going to be working with them. So it's best to learn now how to work with people who are of different ages, because Salesforce was very much a diverse area in terms of age. There was no ageism at all. And my previous jobs before coming back to school dealt with that. So unicorns are huge, and we've heard it with UX people. This is Mario. He's on the London location on my team. He's a digital designer as well, and he's pretty much our cheerleader for creative services, which is the team that I worked on. But anyway, they represent magic, they represent power and badassery and fun and all the multiple disciplines that people practice before coming into this team. We have people who code, we have people who've done consulting, people who've done all kinds of different jobs and found themselves within this team, which I had learned through my coffee chats was a very coveted team to be on because of the creativity. Now, furthermore, my team specifically takes unicorns very seriously. It is their mascot, and they believe in it 100%. They gave me this on my last day so that I could be one of them. So that felt really special. But why I mention this is because it's a culture within a team, within the company. So you have to be aware that people are actually not just hiring you on your skills, but also whether you can fit within the team they're hiring for. So don't ever think that it's just your skills. It's who you are as a person. Some of my job was these lovely things I bulleted for you, and some of the perks include discounted or free events, $100 wellness reimbursement for food, beer, everything, bicycle share. You've got your own laptop to work with over the summer, which is really great because mine is super heavy. And you know, we got swag too, I suppose. Anyway, so the Aloha Spirit is a really, really big deal to Salesforce as a whole. This was Costume, Sean, and I on our very first day at orientation, and Aloha Spirit is the overall family Ohana feeling that you get with each other. My boss hugged me on my first day. Weird, right?
Yeah.
Not for them. So anyway, this is just a few things. If you want specifics, you can contact me on email or Facebook or whatever. Don't worry about it. So anyway, with the lack of time, if anyone's got crazy questions, just hold on to them. Otherwise, I'll take a really short one. So, no? Anyone? Okay, cool. All right.
So pt Nitro, I was in New York this summer. So pt Nitro is an international interactive agency. They had a really big office in New York, which is pretty great. So they do consulting and they're an interactive agency. So they sort of position themselves to help big multi-billion-dollar companies adjust to a very quick changing landscape. A lot of companies are kind of worried about being disrupted. So Signet tries to empathize with them and create websites, concept shape opportunities, and all sorts of cool things. These are just things I pulled from their websites. And I'll talk about it. Okay, so one of their big concepts, they like wrote a book on it or something, is called storyscaping, and I thought it was really interesting because Signet has really big teams and they work with really big companies, so they have to have organizing ideas, and so they come up with sort of like a mantra for their projects. They have to think about the user, but they also have to think about the company's brand. So they sort of come up with a story that unites those things, like the consumers, their users, and their brand. They come up with an organizing idea, and then everyone in their creative team kind of leans back on that idea when they're working on the project over a long period of time. So I thought that was kind of interesting strategy. One cool thing about them is that their culture is flat. So as an intern, they had executive speaking series. So I met CEO, I met these chief creative officers, and they had town halls where the whole company would get together and talk about upcoming news, and you would get to talk with people that are like a lot higher than you or whatever. So it's cool. Also, I worked with mainly women, which was really interesting, mainly because I think that's never happened to me in the tech world. I worked with several like female creative directors, and I just think that's cool. Like as a company, they're doing a good job, sort of creating a equal space. They also develop people, so they're sort of flexible in what your roles are. They have these like different categories, but they have like experience strategy and UX and visual, but they encourage people to kind of try new things. So there are a lot of like inter-company sort of travel. So if you want to try something new, they allow you to. I think that's pretty cool. So experience, strategy, UX, visual. In this program, I felt like we learned the experience strategy part and the UX design part, which is sort of interesting. But they kind of encourage hybrids. So it's cool. So they had divided into pods. Oh, they had like 50 UX people. So it's really big and creative. Their developers are not on site, which is kind of interesting. But they have like 5 different creative directors and then a team for each of these areas. So they try to develop like thought leaders in each of these spots. There's UX creative. There's creative people in each of these categories. So it's a really big team. So one big thing I learned was collaborating with clients. So a lot of the research methods that we learned like last year, we learned last semester, they applied them towards clients. So they really, sometimes they had access to users, but a large body of what they were doing is really trying to understand who they were working with and the expertise that those clients had. And a lot of value that I added as a junior was just sort of like I took notes on these stakeholders and clients, and I almost created like personas based off of the clients, like how they thought of their users. So taking notes was a really interesting way. Anyway, so with big companies and big teams, I thought it was very important to like kind of start making your work visible. So sometimes it's hard to start when the site is huge. And so a big thing I learned was just like taking all these deliverables and like starting it so I could get feedback from directors, feedback from my team. I learned a lot more from my team by like drawing things out and just hearing how they thought about it. And sometimes with the big company it's a little unstructured, you're not sure what you're waiting on. So I felt like you just kind of have to jump in and start sketching and create a lot of stuff. And hope that like you'll get more knowledge of that. So proof of concept. So agents, at least Sapient, a big part of the beginning of their process is discovery, and then they pitch like really high level, interesting concepts. So that was a big part of how they win clients. You have to understand what their clients value and come up with concepts that'll win over that business for the long run. Internship structure. So I worked on an intern project, I worked on client work, and I was given the freedom to shadow whatever project I wanted, which was amazing. The internship project was really broad. They set me up with several mentors. The internship project, it was like tell an unforgettable story. And so we learned that 26% of produce is thrown away before it reaches the shelf. So we created an interactive story that told the stories of these ugly foods. And so you go through the site and you try to get shelved. It's kind of tragic. GoGetShelved.com. And it's really great. And it got, because we have access to all these branding people in the agency, it got recognized by different like people on Washington Post and stuff like Abby. So that was cool and something I normally don't think about when I create something. Just created, let it float, I guess. So with that project, it was because we had an intern making it in a few weeks, in like 2 weeks basically. A large part of the experience was the content. So I worked with someone like a creative writer, and I had to think about what's the experience of a story. And so it was applied very differently to this, I think. And then I also worked on client work, which I can't really talk about, but I worked on research and created concepts, and I got to see that whole process, which was pretty cool. I worked with like a roofing tile manufacturer, which doesn't sound sexy. It wasn't sexy, but it was super interesting, so we run all these magic clients, and that's what I did. These are the two like acquired interactive companies that Sapient has, so I have access to some of these people. They work on all sorts of interesting like creative technology stuff. I encourage you to kind of check out these little companies and see what they're doing. Ask some questions about like how they prototype and test. It's cool. And I ate lots of ramen.
So good.
I discovered ramen and fell in love with ramen. So, New York. So any questions?
This applies to everyone. If you have more questions, please approach any of these people afterwards. You know where to reach us. We're always around. We're always in the studio. Okay, final presentation.
Yeah. Let's start from I'm not that skilled. I mean, I'm really skilled.
So skill, you do it.
So hey everyone, I'm Sarah. For all of you that know me, in the summer I was at eBay and I redesigned the sign-in experience and what the future of eBay sign-in could be. I'm not really going to talk about my project today. I think it's more applicable to talk about the lessons I learned and what I'm going to take in the future, because on my last day I had people coming up and hugging me and asking me when I was coming back, and they want like some PM saying, hey, I want you to be my designer when you come back next year. So I just wanted to give you guys those insights because I think that's way more important for what you could take in the I didn't know them, and I think it will really help in the future. The first thing is always ask questions. My manager, he was really impressed with how many questions I asked. You never have a dumb question. And it was funny, I go up to my mentor and I would just be like, hey, like, I have a question about this. He was like, I never thought about that before. So honestly, like, there's no dumb questions. Maybe think of 5 questions a day to ask random people on your team, and you won't bother them, they'll love it. Speak up in meetings. At first I was like, I don't know if I should say anything, but we're coming from IU. We know a lot more than we think we do. So question things, speak up. I brought up a lot of